The idea that the universe is more than what we can touch and see has existed for a long time and is rooted in philosophical and spiritual traditions around the world. According to this view, our physical world is only the surface of a larger and more complex reality. Beyond what we can perceive with our senses, there is an invisible but real spiritual realm, populated by angels and demons, which has an important influence on our material reality. The Bible contains many stories that speak of these spiritual realities. Angels and demons are not only spiritual beings, but are also active in human history, influencing events, people, and even entire nations. The idea that the spiritual world influences the physical world is a recurring theme, suggesting that many of the things that happen in our world are the result of actions in the spiritual plane. Ancient philosophers such as Plato explored this duality between the material and spiritual worlds, considering them respectively as the world of matter and the world of forms or ideas. According to Plato, the world of forms is eternal and immutable, while the material world is transitory and subject to change. In the biblical context, the existence of angels and demons is a fact. For example, demons are often presented as beings who oppose God and who actively seek to lead humans away from the right path. One of the best-known demons is Beelzebub, mentioned in the New Testament, especially in an episode where Jesus is accused of casting out demons with the power of Beelzebub, the prince of demons, Matthew chapter 12. Beelzebub, originally known as Baalsbaub, is a name that appears in several ancient traditions, suggesting an origin that dates back to pre-Christian cultures. He was revered in some cultures as a deity associated primarily with the city of Ekron, one of the Philistine states. This historical and religious context broadens our understanding of the spiritual figures mentioned in the Bible, showing complex interactions between different religious and cultural traditions. Understanding the nature and role of these spiritual entities, both angels and demons, requires careful study of sacred texts, going beyond simple superficial reading. It is important to consider the theological, historical, and cultural traditions that have influenced these beliefs over the centuries. Fully understanding spiritual realities, as suggested in the original text, may require a divine revelation or spiritual awakening that allows us to see beyond the physical world. The story of Daniel in the Bible offers an interesting and profound insight into the interaction between the physical and spiritual worlds. Daniel, famous for his devotion to God, is in a time of intense spiritual searching, praying fervently for guidance. What happens is an episode that reveals not only the existence of a complex spiritual realm, but also the ongoing battle that takes place beyond our perception. At the center of this story is the Prince of Persia, a powerful spiritual being who acts as an adversary, preventing Daniel from receiving answers to his prayers. This prince is not alone, but is part of a hierarchy of spiritual powers that influence both the spiritual and physical worlds. The intervention of Michael, one of the main archangels, underlines how important and serious this spiritual battle is. This episode teaches us a fundamental truth about prayer and the resistance we often face. It is not just a matter of words or thoughts directed to God, it is an act that impacts the spiritual world in ways we don't always understand. The resistance Daniel encountered shows us that there are spiritual forces working against us, hindering blessings and answers to our prayers. Furthermore, the text mentions kings of darkness, suggesting spiritual entities who have power in specific areas of the spiritual world. These kings prevent the manifestation of good in the physical world. The fact that the answer to Daniel's prayers was sent in the first moment but was prevented by these forces highlights that our spiritual struggles have direct effects on our daily lives. The important lesson we can learn from Daniel's experience is that persistence in prayer is critical in the face of spiritual resistance. It's not enough to ask, we must engage in spiritual battle, armed with faith and supported by divine power. The victory over these forces, as Michael's arrival to help against the Prince of Persia teaches us, reminds us that, even if we find ourselves faced with formidable enemies, we are not alone. We can count on heavenly support if we remain faithful and steadfast in our spiritual quest. What we learn from the Holy Scriptures about the power of prayer and spiritual warfare offers us deep and complex insight into the life of faith. In Ephesians 6:12 and Romans 8, we read that our life is a constant struggle, not against physical forces, but against spiritual entities that seek to separate us from the love of God. This vision shows us that there is a spiritual dimension in which principalities, powers, and rulers of darkness work to separate us from God. But Paul assures us that nothing can separate us from the love of God, not death, not life, not angels, nor demons. This shows us God's sovereignty and supreme power over everything, both in the physical and spiritual worlds. The fact that so much value is placed on prayer as a means of dealing with these spiritual adversities tells us that communicating with God is a powerful weapon against the forces of darkness. Persistence in prayer is important not only as an act of devotion, but because it has a real impact in the spiritual world. The story of Daniel, who continued to pray until he received an answer, gives us an example to follow. Through constant and passionate prayer, we can influence the spiritual realm, bringing God's will to the earth. The message is clear: prayer is a very powerful tool we have to influence the spiritual world and combat the forces that seek to stop God's love on earth. Even in the face of difficulties posed by these spiritual entities, our persistence in prayer can strengthen our connection with God and transform realities in the unseen world. Let's now talk about angels and how they act in the world we cannot see and in the world we can touch. Among the angels, there are the Seraphim, a particular category that has an important role in the Judeo-Christian religion. The prophet Isaiah especially talks about them in the Old Testament, describing them as magnificent creatures with 6 wings, 2 cover the face out of respect, 2 cover the feet to symbolize awareness of their creation, and with the other 2 they fly, ready to serve God. This powerful image highlights their importance in worship and divine service. One seraph, in particular, has a special role when he touches Isaiah's lips with a burning ember, purifying and consecrating him. This shows that seraphim not only worship God, but also help people prepare for the tasks God has assigned them. The presence of the seraphim in the Bible makes us understand that there are many types of angels, each with a specific task according to the divine plan. The cherubim, for example, are symbols of the majesty and holiness of God. Their presence has been remembered since the beginning of human history, when God placed them to guard Eden, armed with a flaming sword. The actions of the cherubim not only prevented Adam and Eve from returning to the garden after disobeying, but they also protected the tree of life. The image of the cherubim who watch over the entrance to Eden tells us that they are like guardians of the divine and remind us how sacred it is. The Bible tells Moses to place images of cherubim on the Ark of the Covenant, as described in Exodus 25. We see them depicted with their wings spread above the lid of the ark, symbolizing their task of protecting and sanctifying what it contains, the tablets of the law, the manna and Aaron's rod. The presence of the cherubim on the ark makes us understand that they are the custodians of God's commandments and that they represent His presence among the people. Revelation, chapter 4, tells us about the cherubim in more complex and symbolic ways, describing them with different faces: a cherub, a human, a lion, and an eagle. This multifaceted representation makes us better understand divine attributes such as God's omniscience and omnipresence. The presence of cherubim around the throne of God makes us understand that they have an important role among the heavenly beings. They not only protect the divine, but also continually worship Him, reflecting His glory and holiness through art and the stories of the Bible. The cherubim make us feel admiration and respect, inviting us to think about the greatness and majesty of God. The Archangel Michael is an important character in the Holy Scriptures, because he fights the forces of evil to protect the faithful. His story in the book of Daniel shows us his power in the spiritual realm and his role as an executor of God's will. Let's talk about Michael, mentioned in the letter to the Thessalonians, chapter 4. Here it is said that Michael will announce the second coming of Christ with a shout, with the voice of an archangel and with the trumpet of God. This shows how important Michael is in the events that concern the future. Michael is seen as a central figure in the divine plan, a leader among the angels who marks the beginning of the resurrection and the ultimate gathering of believers with Christ. Although he is not explicitly called an archangel in the Hebrew Bible, the fact that Michael is considered one of the major princes in the book of Daniel suggests that he is very important among the heavenly beings. This explains that in addition to Michael there could be other archangels, each with a specific role. Gabriel, for example, is known as the messenger of the Annunciation in the book of Luke. Although he is not called an archangel in the scriptures, Michael is called the Great Prince in the book of Daniel, chapter 12. This shows how important it is and what role it plays in protecting God's people, especially during difficult times. The prophetic text speaks of a period of unprecedented calamity, during which Michael's intervention becomes crucial for the salvation of those whose names are written in the book. This shows that celestial forces are involved in human history, helping to fight evil. Michael's role makes us understand that we can trust in divine protection when we face difficult times. Jesus says that he has given us the authority to face evil, and this shows how powerful our faith in him is. If you appreciated this content, we invite you to like the video, leave a comment, and if you haven't already done so, we kindly ask you to subscribe to the channel. Thank you from the bottom of my heart, and may God be with you now and always.